At 9:11 a.m., he smiled and fired me in front of the entire boardroom. 2 minutes later, I hit send. The conference room fell silent as my mentor delivered his rehearsed speech about leadership inadequacies and strategic realignment. His salt and pepper beard couldn't hide the satisfaction creeping across his face. 3 years of building this company together. And he'd finally found his moment to erase me. I didn't argue, didn't defend myself, just reached for my phone under the table, my fingers steady despite the blood pounding in my ears. He didn't know I owned 51% of our $88 million venture. My name is Madeline Pierce, and I've always believed that the best revenge is served not with fire, but with paperwork. The morning of my termination started like any other Tuesday at Axion Edge Analytics. I arrived at our glass-walled offices in downtown Seattle at 7:45 a.m., my usual grande Americano warming my hands against the October chill. The Space Needle pierced through morning fog outside our 14th floor windows, a view that once filled me with pride. We'd come so far from that cramped co-working space in Belltown. I should have known something was wrong when Sandra from HR avoided eye contact in the elevator. When Marcus, our CFO, suddenly ended his call as I passed his office. When the usual morning chatter died as I walked through the open floor plan toward the executive wing. But I was too focused on the code review I'd completed the night before, a breakthrough in our predictive algorithm that would cut supply chain analysis time by 37%. Numbers had always been my language, more reliable than people, more honest than words. The meeting invite had arrived at 9:03 a.m. Mandatory executive session, conference room A. No agenda, no context, just Jonas Reddick's name as the organizer. I entered the fishbowl conference room to find the entire leadership team already assembled. 7 faces turned toward me with expressions ranging from uncomfortable to carefully neutral. Jonas sat at the head of the table, his Patagonia vest and designer jeans projecting that calculated casualness, Silicon Valley mistakes for authenticity. "Madeline, please sit," he said, gesturing to the single empty chair at the far end. The seat usually reserved for guests, not co-founders. I remained standing. "What's this about, Jonas?" He leaned back, fingers steepled, a power pose he'd learned from some executive coach. "We need to discuss your future with Axion Edge." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Through the glass walls, I could see our employees pretending to work while stealing glances at the unfolding drama. Tech companies love transparency until it becomes theater. "The board has lost confidence in your ability to lead our technical operations," Jonas continued, his voice carrying that false concern he'd perfected over years of managing up and kicking down. "Your recent performance, your resistance to strategic pivots, your inability to communicate effectively with stakeholders." "My inability to communicate?" I interrupted, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Or my refusal to let you take credit for my work?" A muscle twitched in his jaw. "This isn't personal, Madeline. It's about what's best for the company. We've grown beyond what I can handle." I pulled out my phone, its weight familiar in my palm. "You mean beyond needing someone to do the actual work while you play CEO at conferences?" "Security will escort you out after this meeting," he said, pushing a folder across the table. "Your severance package is generous, considering the circumstances. 3 months, continued health benefits, and we'll allow you to vest your current equity." "Allow me." As if my 15% equity stake, the one listed in our public filings, was a gift, rather than something I'd earned through 3 years of 80-hour weeks. I looked at each face around the table. Some I'd hired, others I'd mentored. None met my eyes. In Silicon Valley, loyalty has a price tag, and Jonas had clearly met it. "Effective immediately," he added, glancing at his Apple Watch, 9:11 a.m. exactly. The precision wasn't accidental. Jonas orchestrated everything like a TED Talk. I smiled then. Not the polite smile I'd perfected for investor meetings, or the tight smile I wore during his condescending explanations of my own algorithms. This was something else entirely. "Thank you for the clarity, Jonas," I said, typing on my phone. "I have just one question." "What's that?" Do you remember what you told me 3 years ago when I hesitated about giving up my Microsoft job to build this with you? His confidence flickered. I said a lot of things. You said, always know who really owns what. I hit send on the email I'd drafted weeks ago, waiting for this exact moment. Funny thing about advice, sometimes the student actually listens. The notification sound from his phone punctured the silence. Then another from Sandra's. Then Marcus's. Like dominoes falling. Every phone in the room began buzzing with the same message. Jonas grabbed his phone, his face draining of color as he read. The subject line was simple. Notice of emergency shareholder meeting. Majority shareholder request. But it was the sender that made him look up at me with dawning horror. Pierce Holdings LLC. Authorized representative of shareholders controlling 51% of Axion Edge Analytics, Inc. Meeting adjourned, I said, gathering my things with unhurried precision. I'll see you all in the boardroom at 2 p.m. Don't be late. As I walked toward the door, I paused. Oh, and Jonas, security won't be necessary. I know my way out. After all, I own the building. 3 years earlier, I was just another data analyst drowning in Denver's tech scene, building predictive models for a logistics company that treated algorithms like magic spells. Useful, but incomprehensible. I'd attended the AI summit that November out of obligation, not ambition. My manager insisted it would expand my network, which was corporate speak for justify our training budget. Jonas Reddick found me during the lunch break, standing alone by the windows, watching snow dust the Rockies. He moved through crowds like a politician, all firm handshakes and remembered names, but something made him pause at my isolation. Not a fan of networking, he asked, holding 2 glasses of overpriced conference wine. Not a fan of pretending algorithms are more complicated than they are, I replied, nodding toward the main hall where vendors pushed revolutionary AI solutions that were mostly repackaged linear regression. He laughed, genuine, not performed. Jonas Reddick, I'm building something real in Seattle. No smoke and mirrors, just solid supply chain optimization. That was his gift, making you feel seen. Over the next hour, he drew out my ideas about predictive modeling, my frustration with corporate bureaucracy, my hunger to build something meaningful. He listened with an intensity that made me feel brilliant. You're wasted in middle management, he said as the conference resumed. I need someone who understands the tech and isn't afraid to challenge conventional thinking. Move to Seattle. Be my co-founder. The title felt impossibly large in my mouth. Co-founder. Not senior analyst or team lead, but co-founder, equal, partner. I believed him. The early days reinforced that belief. We worked from his Fremont loft, whiteboards covering every wall, surviving on takeout and ambition. Jonas handled the business side, pitching investors, schmoozing potential clients, crafting the narrative. I built our core technology, turning supply chain chaos into predictable patterns. You're the genius, he'd say during late nights, reviewing my code with admiration he couldn't fake. I'm just the guy who packages it pretty. But packaging, I learned, was everything in Silicon Valley. The first shift came during our seed round. Jonas prepared the pitch deck, practiced his presentation for weeks. The night before our first investor meeting, he showed me the slides. There I was on the team page. Madeline Pierce, CTO. His title, Jonas Reddick, CEO and founder. Founder, I asked. Singular? It's cleaner for the narrative, he explained, hand on my shoulder. Investors like a clear leader. But we know the truth, right? This is our baby. I let it go. What did titles matter when we were building something revolutionary? But patterns emerged. During investor meetings, Jonas would introduce me as his technical genius, who preferred coding to conference rooms. When I'd start explaining our algorithm's advantages, he'd interrupt with, "What Madeline means in business terms is..." My innovations became our technology. Then gradually, the technology I've directed my team to build. The pattern crystallized during TechCrunch Disrupt. A reporter asked about our breakthrough in real-time optimization. Jonas smoothly redirected. I realized early on that the key was hiring brilliant people like Madeline and giving them the vision to execute. Hiring. Like I was employee number one, not the person who'd written every line of our core platform. You have to understand the game, he told me afterward, seeing my frustration. I'm not diminishing your contribution, I'm translating it. Investors, clients, media, they need a story, a face. You hate that stuff anyway. He wasn't wrong. I did hate the performance aspect. But I began to realize my introversion had become his excuse. My preference for substance over style, his justification for erasure. The breaking point came during our Series A. We were negotiating with Apex Ventures, and Jonas suggested I skip the final partner meeting. Too many cooks, he said. Plus, you have that code review, right? That's where you shine. I found out later he'd presented my optimization breakthrough as his vision, implemented by his world-class technical team. The partners were impressed by his deep understanding of the technology. My technology. That night, I made two decisions. First, I would learn the game he claimed I couldn't play. Second, I would play it better than him. I hired Derek Halston quietly, paying him from my savings. I need to understand corporate structure, I told him. Equity, control, board dynamics, everything. Planning to start your own company? He asked. No, I said. Planning to keep the one I already built. Jonas never noticed my transformation. I remained the quiet technical genius, building our platform while he built our reputation. He didn't see me reading corporate law textbooks during lunch, didn't question why I suddenly volunteered to handle boring paperwork for our Series A extension, didn't realize that every document I touched, I truly understood. You're getting better at the business side, he mentioned once, finding me reviewing term sheets. You were right, I replied, letting him hear what he expected. I needed to grow. Thank you for pushing me. He preened at that. The mentor validated. See? I told you I'd make you more than just a coder. Just a coder? The words lodged like splinters, fueling every late night I spent understanding cap tables and shareholder agreements. He thought he was civilizing me, teaching the brilliant savage to speak corporate. He never realized I was learning a different language entirely, the vocabulary of ownership. The final insult came wrapped in false concern. During our Series B negotiations, Jonas pulled me aside. The board is worried about technical leadership scaling issues. I told them you're brilliant but still growing into the role. Maybe we should bring in a seasoned CTO above you. You could focus on what you love, pure innovation. I nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. I trust your judgment. His relief was palpable. I knew you'd understand. This is why we work so well together. You trust me to handle the business side. Trust. As if trust was why I'd spent months structuring Pierce Holdings LLC, quietly exercising options, negotiating side agreements with departing employees for their shares. Trust had nothing to do with the chess game I'd been playing while he basked in his kingdom. You're too nice, my friend Sarah said when I told her about the proposed demotion. Why don't you fight back? I am fighting, I replied. He just doesn't know it yet. The education began with a single question to Derek Halston. How does someone lose a company they founded? We met at a dive bar in Georgetown, far from the polished establishments where Seattle's tech elite networked. Derek, a securities lawyer who'd grown tired of making rich people richer, appreciated the irony. Simple, he said, sketching on a napkin. They focus on running it instead of owning it. Share by share, round by round, they dilute themselves into employees. But I have 15%, I protested. Jonas has 22%. That's standard for co-founders after Series A. 15% of what? Derek asked. Common stock? Preferred? Who controls the board? Who has voting rights versus economic rights? He pushed the napkin toward me. Power isn't about percentages. It's about structure. That night, I went home and really read our incorporation documents for the first time. Not the cursory scan Jonas had encouraged. Standard boilerplate, nothing to worry about. But a line-by-line analysis. What I found was a masterclass in subtle control. Jonas had layered provisions that gave him outsized influence, board seat allocation, protective provisions, drag-along rights all tilted in his favor. You need to think like a chess player, Derek advised during our next meeting. Every move sets up the next three. What's your endgame? Control, I said without hesitation. Not just influence, control. The plan took 18 months to execute, while Jonas focused on our Series B raise, traveling between Silicon Valley and Seattle. Selling our vision to bigger funds, I worked in the shadows of corporate structure. First came Pierce Holdings LLC, registered in Delaware with Derek's help. A simple entity that could hold shares without appearing on cap tables under my name. Jonas never questioned why I wanted to clean up my personal finances by transferring my shares to an LLC. Smart tax planning, he'd commented, signing the consent forms without reading them. Why would he? I was Madeline, the technical genius who needed his guidance for business matters. The real opportunity came through our employees. ActionEdge had grown to 43 people, many holding small equity stakes. As Silicon Valley always does, some grew restless, got better offers, needed cash for life events. When they left, their vested shares became available. Company has right of first refusal, Jonas would remind them. But we rarely exercise it, not worth the cash outlay. But Pierce Holdings had no such cash constraints. I liquidated my Microsoft 401k, sold my condo, moved to a studio apartment in Wallingford. Every dollar went to quietly purchasing departing employees' shares. Not directly, that would show up on reports Jonas might actually read. Instead, through secondary sales, assignments, and side agreements Derek structured to be legally bulletproof but practically invisible, Jonas helped unknowingly. His ego demanded he be the face of every success, which meant I remained invisible to investors and board members. When Apex Partners asked about technical leadership during Series B diligence, Jonas assured them I was brilliant but needs support on the business side. They never thought to dig deeper into who actually owned what. The masterstroke came through our Series A lead investors associate, a young analyst named Tom Chen who'd grown frustrated with his firm's politics. Over coffee, he mentioned their fund was looking to sell part of their position to free up capital for new investments. 15% of ActionEdge stuck in a portfolio that needs liquidity, Tom explained. My partners would sell at a slight discount to avoid the hassle of finding buyers. Interesting, I said carefully. Know anyone looking? That's why I'm telling you. He smiled. I know you've been buying small stakes. This could be significant. The number he quoted made my stomach drop. It would take everything, my remaining savings, a loan against my vested options, even borrowing from my parents. But it would put me over 40%. I need 2 weeks, I told him. You have one, he replied. After that, they go to market. I spent that week in a haze of spreadsheets and legal documents. Derek worked 18-hour days structuring the deal through multiple entities to stay under reporting thresholds. My parents, confused but trusting, wired their retirement savings. It's an investment in my future, I told them, which wasn't a lie. The purchase closed on a Friday afternoon. Jonas was in San Francisco, charming Series B investors with promises of unicorn valuations. He texted me a photo from Sequoia's office. Crushing it, they love our vision. Our vision? I stared at my laptop screen showing Pierce Holdings' positions. 41% of ActionEdge Analytics. Assembled piece by piece like a mosaic he never bothered to see. You need more, Derek warned. 41% is influence, not control. He was right. But the Series B would solve that problem in an unexpected way. Jonas, in his eagerness to raise at a higher valuation, had agreed to a complex structure that created new share classes. The legal mechanics were Byzantine, but the result was simple. Existing shareholders could purchase additional shares at a discount to maintain their percentage ownership if they knew to ask. Jonas, focused on the headline number, $88 million valuation, never mentioned this provision to me. Technical details he'd said about the hundreds of pages of documentation. That's why we have lawyers. Yes, I thought, reviewing the provisions Derek had flagged. That's exactly why we have lawyers. The anti-dilution provisions were buried in subsection 4.3. 2. The preemptive rights in Exhibit J. Jonas had negotiated hard for his own protections, ensuring his 22% wouldn't dilute. He never imagined I'd exercise the same rights through Pierce Holdings and two other entities Derek had structured. By the time the Series B closed, Seattle was celebrating our success. Tech blogs praised Jonas's vision, investors lauded his leadership. Our employees toasted to stock options that might actually mean something. I celebrated alone in my studio apartment, staring at the final calculations. 51%. Not of common stock. Not of one class of shares, but voting control of Axion Edge Analytics, Inc. Now what? Derek asked when I confirmed the final numbers. Now I wait, I said. Jonas taught me that timing is everything in business. Wait for what? I thought about 3 years of being diminished, dismissed, erased, of watching my work become his achievements, my innovations, his vision, of smiling politely while he explained my own algorithms to rooms full of men who looked just like him. For him to overplay his hand, I replied, ego, like his always does. The morning of October 15th arrived with unusual clarity. Seattle's perpetual gray had lifted, revealing Mount Rainier in the distance, like a promise. I stood at my apartment window, phone in hand, watching Jonas's Tesla pull into the parking garage at 8:47 a.m. Predictable as code. Derek had called the night before. He's making his move tomorrow. Sandra from HR leaked the agenda. You mean Sandra from HR accepted a better offer and shared concerns about corporate governance, I corrected. Right. That. Anyway, you're the only item on the executive session agenda. Subject, leadership restructuring. Leadership restructuring, corporate speak for public execution. I dressed carefully that morning. Not the usual jeans and startup-branded hoodie that marked me as technical staff, but a charcoal suit I'd bought months ago for this exact moment. If Jonas wanted corporate theater, I'd give him a performance worth remembering. The office hummed with nervous energy when I arrived. Word travels fast in open floor plans, and everyone knew something significant was happening. I caught glimpses of Slack messages quickly minimized, heard conversations die mid-sentence. Madeline. Rachel from product management touched my arm as I passed. Whatever happens in there will be interesting, I finished, offering a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I spent the hour before the meeting in my office, reviewing the email Derek had prepared. Every word had been crafted for maximum legal impact. The subject line alone, notice of emergency shareholder meeting, would trigger automatic protocols. But it was the attachment that would stop Jonas cold, a detailed breakdown of Pierce Holdings' ownership structure, accompanied by irrefutable documentation. My phone buzzed. Jonas, sending a reminder about the 9:00 meeting as if I might forget my own execution. I noticed he'd CC'd the entire leadership team. Public humiliation required an audience. At 9:03, the meeting invite arrived. The 7-minute delay was intentional, just enough to seem like an afterthought, not enough to allow preparation. I recognized the psychological play. Make me rush, arrive flustered, off balance. Amateur tactics from someone who'd read too many power dynamics books. I waited until 9:09 to leave my office, walking slowly through the developer bay. Several engineers looked up, offering subtle nods of support. They knew who actually built what they worked on every day. The conference room scene was staged like a tribunal. Jonas at the head, board members dialed in on the wall screen, leadership team arranged like a jury. The single chair at the far end wasn't just insulting, it was designed to isolate. I remained standing. Madeline, please sit, Jonas said, his voice carrying false concern like a badly tuned instrument. I'm comfortable, thanks. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. The scene wasn't playing as scripted. Very well. He shuffled papers importantly, props in his performance. We need to discuss your future with Axion Edge. The words hung between us like a challenge. Through the glass walls, I could see employees abandoning all pretense of work, openly staring at the unfolding drama. Someone should have chosen a private room for a firing, but Jonas never could resist an audience. The board has lost confidence in your ability to lead our technical operations, he continued, reading from prepared notes. Your recent performance, your resistance to strategic pivots, your inability to communicate effectively with stakeholders. My inability to communicate, I interrupted, my voice cutting through his rehearsed rhythm. Or my refusal to let you take credit for my work. His jaw tightened. Off script already. This isn't personal, Madeline. It's about what's best for the company. We've grown beyond what you can. What I can handle. I pulled out my phone with deliberate calm. You mean beyond needing someone to do the actual work while you play CEO at conferences? Security will escort you out after this meeting, he pressed on, sliding a folder across the table. Your severance package is generous, considering the circumstances. 3 months, continued health benefits, and we'll allow you to vest your current equity. Allow me. The condescension in those 2 words burned like acid. I looked at each face around the table, Sandra from HR, who'd already accepted an offer from Microsoft, Marcus, our CFO, whose expression suggested he knew more than Jonas realized, the other executives who'd chosen their side in this corporate coup. Effective immediately, Jonas added, checking his watch with theatrical precision. 9:11 a.m. exactly. The timestamp mattered to him. Everything had to be memorable, quotable, worthy of his future biography. The brilliant CEO who made tough decisions with surgical precision. I smiled, not the diminished smile of the past 3 years, but something fuller. Real. The expression made several people shift uncomfortably. Thank you for the clarity, Jonas, I said, typing on my phone with practiced efficiency. I have just one question. His confidence was absolute. In his mind, he'd already won. What's that? Do you remember what you told me 3 years ago, when I hesitated about giving up my Microsoft job to build this with you? The question caught him off guard. His prepared script didn't include reminiscence. I said a lot of things. You said, always know who really owns what. My finger hovered over the send button. Funny thing about advice, sometimes the student actually listens. I pressed send. The notification sound from his phone cracked the silence like a starting pistol. Then Sandra's chimed, then Marcus's. Around the table. Phones buzzed and pinged as the same email landed in every inbox. Jonas grabbed his phone with the urgency of someone defusing a bomb. I watched his face change as he read. Confidence to confusion, to comprehension, to horror. The blood literally drained from his cheeks. Behind him, on the conference screen, I could see board members reaching for their devices, their faces pixelated but their alarm clear. What is this? Jonas's voice cracked, the polished executive persona splintering. Due process, I replied. Something you should have considered before staging this little show. Marcus was the first to speak up, his accountant's mind already processing the implications. 51%? How is that possible? Pierce Holdings, LLC, I said conversationally, as if discussing quarterly reports. Plus 2 subsidiary entities, all properly documented, all transactions legally executed. Derek Halston has the paperwork if anyone wants to verify. This is fraud, Jonas stood, his chair rolling backward. Securities fraud, market manipulation. You can't. I can, I interrupted. I did. Every share purchased properly, every disclosure filed as required. You just never bothered to look. The room erupted, board members shouting through the screen, executives talking over each other, Sandra furiously typing on her laptop. Only I remained calm in the chaos, standing at the far end of the table like the eye of a hurricane. Meeting adjourned, I announced, gathering my things with unhurried precision. I'll see you all in the boardroom at 2 p.m. Don't be late. As I walked toward the door, I paused beside Jonas's chair. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the collapse of his carefully constructed reality. "Oh, and Jonas," I added. "Security won't be necessary. I know my way out. After all, I own the building." The last thing I saw before leaving was his reflection in the conference room glass, a man watching his kingdom crumble, one share at a time. The 5 hours between meetings passed in a blur of legal machinery. My phone buzzed constantly. Board members, investors, employees, reporters who'd somehow already caught wind of the drama. I ignored them all, sitting in my Tesla in the parking garage, laptop open, coordinating with Derek. Jonas's lawyer is claiming breach of fiduciary duty. Derek reported over speakerphone. Says you concealed material information while serving as an officer. I disclosed everything required by law, I replied, reviewing the shareholder registry one final time. Just because he didn't read the filings doesn't make it concealment. They're also arguing market manipulation, improper use of insider information, violation of company policies, desperation. I cut him off. How many lawyers are in the building? His team has 3. We have 7. Plus 2 corporate governance specialists flying in from San Francisco. They'll land by 1:30. 7 lawyers. The number felt excessive 6 months ago when Derek suggested retaining them. Now it felt like armor. At 1:45, I re-entered the building through the main lobby. The receptionist, Keiko, who'd been with us since the Fremont days, gave me a subtle thumbs up. Word had spread through every floor, every department. The developers knew, the sales team knew, even the interns knew that something seismic was happening on the 14th floor. The boardroom was already packed when I arrived. Jonas had commandeered one side of the table with his legal team and loyal executives. My side filled quickly with Derek's team, each carrying bankers' boxes of documentation. The board members, still on video, looked like a judicial panel overseeing corporate warfare. "This is illegal," Jonas started before I'd even sat down. "This entire meeting is improper, and we'll be filing motion to proceed with shareholder vote per Section 242 of Delaware Corporate Code." Derek interrupted, his voice cutting through the bluster. "Pierce Holdings, LLC, representing 51% of voting shares, calls for the immediate removal of Jonas Reddick as Chief Executive Officer." "You can't do this." Jonas slammed his hand on the table. "I built this company." "We built this company," I corrected, my voice steady. "The difference is, I also bought it." What followed was 3 hours of legal combat. Jonas's team challenged every document, every transaction, every technicality they could find. They demanded recounts, verifications, authentication of signatures. They called for delays, investigations, SEC involvement. Derek's team responded with mechanical precision. Every challenge met with documentation, every accusation countered with facts. Watching them work was like watching code execute, clean, efficient, inevitable. The turning point came when Jonas's lead attorney, a silver-haired man who'd clearly expected an easy corporate coup, finally admitted, "The share ownership appears to be legally structured." "Appears to be." Derek smiled. "Would you like another hour to review?" "We have time. My client owns the majority of this company. We can wait." Jonas turned to the board members on screen. "You can't let this happen. Think about the investors, the employees, the vision we've built." "The vision she built," interrupted Robert Huang, our lead board member from Apex Partners. "Jonas, I've reviewed the code commits, the patent filings, the actual technical architecture. Madeline's name is on everything that makes this company valuable. I brought the business expertise." Jonas's composure finally cracked completely. "The connections, the leadership." "And she brought the product," Robert replied, "without which your expertise connects to nothing." The vote, when it came, was anticlimactic. Derek called for the motion. I voted my 51% in favor. The remaining shareholders, some supporting Jonas, others abstaining, couldn't overcome simple math. "Motion carries," Derek announced. "Jonas Reddick is hereby removed as Chief Executive Officer of Axion Edge Analytics, effective immediately." The silence that followed felt like the space between lightning and thunder. Jonas sat frozen, his world reconfiguring in real time. Furthermore, Derek continued, Pierce Holdings moves to reconstitute the board of directors. Stop! Jonas's voice came out broken. Just stop. For the first time in 3 years, I saw him without the mask. No performance, no positioning. Just a middle-aged man watching his carefully constructed identity evaporate. May we have the room? I asked. Jonas and I need 5 minutes. The lawyers looked skeptical, but I insisted. One by one, they filed out, leaving us alone in the boardroom where he'd planned my professional funeral that morning. Why? He asked when the door closed. We were partners. I mentored you. No, I said quietly. You used me. There's a difference. I made you successful. You made yourself successful using my work. I pulled up a slide on the room's screen, our original incorporation documents. Look at the signature lines, Jonas, co-founder, equal. That's what we agreed to be. You weren't ready for what? The spotlight? The conferences? The glory? I shook my head. You're right, I wasn't interested in those things. But you mistook disinterest for inability. Confused quiet for weakness. He slumped in his chair, aging years in minutes. What happens now? Now you leave. Quietly. No press statements, no LinkedIn posts about new adventures. You'll keep your health insurance through year-end and vest what you've earned. More than you offered me this morning. That's it? After everything? That's it. I stood, gathering my papers. You taught me that business isn't personal, remember? And the company? You think you can run it without me? Jonas, I said, pausing at the door. I've been running it without you for 3 years. The only difference is now everyone knows it. I opened the door to find the hallway packed with employees. They'd abandoned all pretense of work, gathering to witness the changing of the guard. As I emerged, someone started clapping, then another. Soon the applause echoed off the glass walls, following me down the corridor. But I didn't stop to acknowledge it. There was too much work to do, too much to fix. The real job, building something meaningful, was just beginning. Behind me, through the boardroom's glass walls, I could see Jonas still sitting alone at the table, surrounded by the ghost of his ambitions. By tomorrow, he'd be a footnote in Action Edge's history. A cautionary tale about the difference between taking credit and creating value. He taught me one true thing in 3 years. Always know who really owns what. I owned 51% of the company. But, more importantly, I owned 100% of myself. The next morning arrived gray and ordinary, as if Seattle itself hadn't registered the seismic shift in the glass towers downtown. I arrived at the office at 6:30 a.m., before even the most ambitious engineers. The 14th floor felt different in the pre-dawn quiet, mine now, fully and legally. Jonas's office, the corner suite with views of Elliott Bay, stood empty. His personal items had been removed overnight by the movers I'd arranged, packed carefully into boxes and delivered to his Bellevue mansion. Professional to the end, even in termination. I didn't move into his office. Instead, I set up in the small conference room adjacent to the engineering floor, visible through glass walls to everyone who actually built our products. The corner office would become a meeting space, its prestigious views democratized. By 8 a.m., the leadership team had assembled, some who'd supported Jonas, others who'd remained neutral, all now recalibrating their positions in the new reality. I'm not interested in loyalty oaths, I began, looking at each face. You chose Jonas's vision of this company. I'm offering you a chance to choose mine. Those who can't, I'll help find positions elsewhere. Those who stay, we build something real. Marcus spoke first. What's your vision? The same it's always been. Create technology that actually solves problems. The difference is we'll stop pretending complexity equals value. No more feature bloat to justify price increases. No more pivoting to whatever Silicon Valley thinks is hot this quarter. The investors won't like that, Sandra warned. They expect hockey stick growth. The investors own 49%, I reminded her. They'll adjust. Over the following weeks, the company transformed with surgical precision. I promoted Rachel to Chief Product Officer, elevating someone who understood our customers' actual needs. The lead engineers who'd been buried under layers of middle management found themselves in direct conversation with decision-makers. The PR team crafted careful messaging about leadership transitions and returning to technical roots. But I killed the press release they'd written positioning me as the triumphant female founder. That narrative, the one where gender was the lead instead of competence, was just another box, shinier but equally constraining. 3 weeks after the coup, Robert Huang from Apex Partners requested a private meeting. We sat in the democratized corner office, rain streaking the windows. The other investors are nervous, he said without preamble. Jonas was their interface. They understood him. They understood his performance, I corrected. His promises of unicorn valuations built on technical debt were still paying down. You're reorganizing everything, slowing growth projections. Some want to push for a sale while the valuation holds. I'd expected this. Derek had prepared me for the investor revolt that often followed founder disputes. They can push. I own 51%. That's a dangerous game. Madeline. Majority control doesn't mean you can ignore market realities. Market realities? I pulled up our actual metrics on my laptop. Customer churn down 30% since I eliminated features that existed only for demos. Development velocity up 40% now that engineers aren't rebuilding Jonas's pivots every quarter. Revenue per customer increasing because we're solving real problems instead of selling promises. Robert studied the numbers. The growth rate will be sustainable, not a hockey stick that breaks the moment pressure is applied. I closed the laptop. I'm not building a company to flip in 18 months. If your partners want out, I'll buy their shares. His eyebrows rose. With what capital? The same capital I used to buy control. Patience and planning. He left unconvinced but unable to argue with mathematical reality. I owned the votes. Everything else was negotiation. The hardest conversation came 6 weeks later. Jonas had maintained public silence as agreed, but private channels carried his version of events. The Seattle tech community loved gossip, and the story of the quiet CTO who'd staged a hostile takeover spread through whisper networks and happy hour conversations. Then he called. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. What could he possibly want now? Madeline. His voice sounded different, smaller. I need a recommendation. A recommendation? I couldn't hide my disbelief. You're serious? I'm interviewing for a VP position at Tableau. They want to verify my role in building Axion Edge. The audacity should have surprised me, but it didn't. Jonas lived in a reality where his needs always justified his asks. You want me to recommend you. After everything, I'm not asking you to lie, just confirm I was CEO, that we built something valuable together. Together, even now, he couldn't help himself. Send me the contact, I said finally. I'll tell them exactly what kind of executive you are. Madeline, I'll be honest. Jonas, isn't that what you'd want? The unvarnished truth about your leadership style? The silence stretched between us, filled with everything we both knew I could say. The stolen credit, the public humiliations, the systematic erasure of my contributions. I made you better, he said finally, defensively. You were just a coder when we met. No, I replied. I was always this. You just couldn't see it. I hung up and drafted the recommendation that afternoon. It was scrupulously professional, confirming his role, his dates of employment, his focus on business development and investor relations. Every word true, every absence speaking volumes. He didn't get the Tableau job. By December, Axion Edge had stabilized into something sustainable. We missed our aggressive Q4 projections but exceeded every metric that actually mattered: customer satisfaction, employee retention, technical stability. The board, faced with undeniable results, stopped pushing for the hockey stick growth that broke most startups. I instituted transparent equity discussions, ensuring every employee understood their ownership stake. No more hiding behind complex structures. No more information asymmetry used as control. On the anniversary of the coup, we all knew the date, even if no one spoke it aloud. I found a package on my desk. No return address. But I recognized Jonas's handwriting. Inside was a single photo from our early days, working in his Fremont loft. We stood before a whiteboard covered in my algorithms, both smiling at the camera. Below it, he'd written, "You were right, you owned it all along." I studied the photo, remembering that moment. The excitement of building something new, the belief that partnership meant equality, the naive trust that contribution would equal recognition. Then I fed it into the shredder. The past was educational, but not decorative. I had a company to run, products to build, problems to solve. The corner office remained a meeting room. My desk stayed on the engineering floor, surrounded by the people who understood that creating value meant more than claiming it. Jonas had taught me about ownership, though not the way he'd intended. He'd shown me how power worked by wielding it carelessly, how credit flowed by redirecting it selfishly, how narratives formed by crafting them relentlessly. But I'd learned a different lesson. True ownership isn't about percentages or paperwork. It's about building something so intrinsically yours that no amount of corporate maneuvering can erase your fingerprints from its DNA. I owned 51% of Axion Edge Analytics. But more importantly, I owned every line of code that made it matter. 6 months later, I stood in the same conference room where Jonas had tried to erase me. The morning light filtered through Seattle's perpetual clouds, casting long shadows across the table where my professional execution had been staged. Now it hosted our weekly engineering stand-up, voices animated with actual problem-solving instead of performative buzzwords. The company had found its rhythm. Not the manic pace of a startup chasing valuations, but the steady pulse of a business creating real value. Our latest quarterly report showed something unusual in Silicon Valley. Consistent, sustainable growth. No hockey sticks, no moonshots. Just solid technology solving actual problems. I hadn't spoken publicly about the takeover. The tech press had moved on to fresher drama. Another founder ousted, another unicorn deflating. The endless cycle of Silicon Valley hubris. Axion Edge became known for its products, not its politics, exactly as I'd intended. But silence has its own weight. Every woman who'd been diminished in a conference room, every engineer whose work became someone else's triumph. Every quiet voice drowned out by louder ones. They recognized something in our story. The emails came daily, asking how I'd done it, seeking advice, sharing their own tales of erasure. I couldn't answer them all, but I could build something different. We instituted blind code reviews, where work was evaluated without names attached. Suddenly, the brilliant contributions weren't always from the usual suspects. We restructured meetings to require written proposals before verbal presentations, leveling the field for those who thought better in text than performance. We made salaries transparent, exposing the gaps that flourished in secrecy. The culture shift wasn't painless. Some engineers, comfortable in the old hierarchy where technical skill translated to social dominance, bristled at the changes. A few left for companies that still mistook volume for vision. I helped them find good positions. No bridges burned, no drama. Just recognition that not everyone wanted what we were building. Rachel found me one evening, working late in the communal space that had replaced executive offices. The new junior developer, Amit, just submitted an optimization that'll save us $200K annually in server costs. Excellent, make sure it's documented in his performance review. Already done, and I CC'd him on the email to the board about it. She paused. That's what's different, isn't it? The credit flows to where the work happens. Revolutionary concept, I said dryly, acknowledging who actually does what. She laughed, but there was weight behind it. We both knew how rare that simple acknowledgement could be. The anniversary of my hiring, not the coup, but the beginning, arrived with typical Seattle rain. I'd spent 4 years at Axion Edge, 3 of them fighting for recognition. One building something worth recognizing. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the Times article about Axion Edge's sustainable growth model. You've built something real. J. I stared at the message, waiting for the familiar anger to rise. Instead, I felt nothing. Jonas had become irrelevant the moment he'd confused ownership with control, leadership with performance. His validation meant as little as his dismissal once had meant too much. I deleted the text without responding. That night, I found myself in the parking garage, sitting in my car like I had the morning of the coup. But instead of coordinating lawyers, I was reviewing code commits from the day. Amit's optimization was elegant, the kind of solution that looked simple only because someone brilliant had made it so. Tomorrow, he'd present it to the team, his name attached, his voice credited. My phone rang. Derek, probably with another legal update about nothing. We need to talk about your succession planning, he said without preamble. I'm 34. Derek. Not exactly retirement age. That's not what I mean. You've built a company that depends on your majority control to maintain its culture. What happens when you're not here? It was a fair question. I'd used ownership as a weapon to create space for competence over charisma. But weapons could be inherited by anyone, wielded for any purpose. I'm working on it, I told him. Trust structures, employee ownership expansion. Ways to embed the values in the architecture, not the personalities. Good. Because what you've built, it matters. After we hung up, I sat in the fluorescent garage light, thinking about legacy. Jonas had wanted to build a monument to himself. I'd wanted to build something that worked. The difference seemed smaller in the dark. Both required ego, ambition, the belief that your vision mattered enough to impose it on the world. But I thought about Amit's code, elegant and uncredited for who knew how long before today. About Rachel, whose product insights had been filtered through layers of mail translation before she'd had direct access to decision-making. About the 1,000 small erasures that happen daily in offices around the world, not through malice, but through the simple assumption that volume equaled value, that performance equaled productivity. I'd used ownership to create a different space. Not perfect, perfection was another performance, but functional. A place where the quiet voices could be heard without shouting, where work could speak without translation, where credit flowed to its source instead of its loudest champion. The rain intensified, drumming against the concrete ceiling. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, investor pressures, competitive threats, the endless complexity of building something real in a world that preferred beautiful failures to sustainable success. But tonight, I owned 51% of a company that did what it promised. The algorithms worked. The products solved problems. The people who built them were acknowledged. Jonas had taught me that ownership mattered. He just hadn't expected me to learn the lesson so well. I started the car, ready to drive home to my life beyond these glass walls. As I pulled out of the garage, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the quiet coder who'd been hired 4 years ago, or the vengeful founder who'd staged a coup. She was something more practical, someone who'd learned that power wasn't about wielding it, but about creating spaces where it wasn't needed. 51%. It had been enough to take control. Now came the harder part, building something worth controlling. But that's what engineers do. We build, we optimize, we iterate until the solution is elegant, and sometimes, if we're very careful and very lucky, we own what we create. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'm curious. Where are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know what city or country you're tuning in from. I love connecting with listeners around the world. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Did Madeline's journey remind you of your own experiences? What would you have done in her position? Let's discuss in the comments below.